So I've been researching a lot of stuff around multi-tracks lately, and I thought it'd be helpful, mainly for me, to chat about them. Here's Teddy, he's got my sock. This video isn't going to be as hands-on as a lot of videos are, but I have, and the other thing is I'm going to assume you know a lot of these models because I can't really go over each one without you knowing what they are. So it's kind of a niche video for people who like multi-tracks. I mean, I started out with multi-tracks when I was like 13 years old. I rented a Tascam 424 MK2, and I regret not buying it because I never, later on I found it hard to get. I once got one on Kijiji a few years ago, and it was a disaster because a lot of mixers, Teddy's already licked the R20, a lot of mixers get subjected to, and recorders, they get subjected to a lot of abuse in sort of studio and rehearsal spaces, people pouring drinks on them and smoking and that sort of thing. So I never got to own the Tascam tape. That's the 424 is the tape machine, and later on I rented a Yamaha mini disc one that was very good, and I bet that thing probably holds up pretty well by what's coming out these days. But let's jump into modern devices. So the first one is the Tascam Dp-08. I have this. I've enjoyed it. And the Zoom R20, I have this on rental, and I'm pretty impressed by it so far. But I think I think what I've come up with is sort of like a bit of a framework, because there's so many of these devices, and the framework is pretty much how you pick any piece of gear when you have a lot of options. And in this case, it's really about knowing what is the highest priority to deal with. Why are you looking for this type of machine? It's very common now because a lot of people are interested in recording without a computer, and I'm personally very frustrated with computer. I've had a bad experience because I kind of was stupid to use a MacBook Air as a studio computer, and it's not holding up. Obviously, it's got two USB-C ports as its only I/O, and that means you're in dongles. And there's been a lot of issues. I had one issue with a hard drive as a result of this dongling. And I have a PC now, which is good because it has a second hard drive inside of it. It's a gaming laptop by MSI, and so that's making things a bit better. And I'm setting that up slowly. But overall, I've had issues, and also as I do more with live instruments, there are a lot of latency issues with computers, and the latency issues are they're on every device because it's a fact of recording is that they're just the science of like sending signals, and there's always latency. So I don't like to pick on computers. If you get a good sound card that helps you do direct monitoring, that helps a lot. But anyways, my I guess preference, my priority would be a device that I can record with. Say, I'm in the den or the bedroom. I like to record there rather than in my studio office is near the front door. It doesn't have, and the room doesn't sound very good. It doesn't have the vibe. In the bedroom or the den, I can look out the window, and it's very nice. And I've just found like certain rooms have the vibe, other rooms don't. So something portable, and that knocks out a whole whack of the devices out there, such as the Model 12 is a chunky. It becomes, and Model 12 is the smallest of the bunch. It just becomes kind of chunky, and And also Model 12 has a lot of features in it that it's got a lot of stuff, and I don't want that much stuff. Model 12 would work really nice as the center of a studio, I think, or Model 16. So the Dp-08ex by Tascam has been pretty good. I think it's one of the issues is it's only got 2 ins, and also it doesn't have bars and beats, so it only shows you the time counting, and recording rate is a little low. I think it's a 16-bit machine. Overall, it's fine. The workflow is pretty good. You have knobs that can knobs, and then there's quick access to reverb, which makes it what you're working on sound pretty good. There's a bounce and mix down mastering modes, and assigning tracks works pretty well. I would say that the flow of this machine is almost as good as you're going to get. It's obviously hard to name your projects with a jog wheel, and you have to do a little bit of an export to get your tracks. If you want separated WAV files, it has to render them on the machine. So if that was a long project, 20-minute type jam, that's going to take a while to do, but you can pick which tracks you want it to render. Whereas on the Zoom, those are ready to go right away. So the metronome on this is very low in volume. After 1 or 2 tracks, you can't even hear it anymore. I've read that review many places. So you'd have to record your own metronome, or just use an app like Drum Jam, the line outs of a phone, and put it into here for a backing track. But with no bars and beats, it's a little hard to know where, if you're doing like a composition in a songwriting type thing, you could get lost pretty quickly. But there is a foot switch for punch in and out. One big thing about this one is the operating noise is a little noisy. There's a hissing sound, but I think when you bring the tracks into the computer, you don't hear it. I think it's mainly in the headphone amp or something, is a hissy sound. So that's that. I would say learning from so the funny thing about the R20 is I'm just renting it, and I used it on the podcast last night, and I would say I'm learning stuff that every time you play with a device, you learn stuff that carries over to other devices. With the R20, I've learned it's very handy to plug the device in over power, and R20 only works over power. And this is handy because if you use any mics that have phantom power, you can't use a battery. So just get in the habit of plugging the thing in. R20. So R20, I'm new to it. It's I would say I did a pretty good. I did a 30-minute session with it for the podcast. I'm very interested in it because of the screen. The it's not on. You've seen the videos. It's pretty amazing that this is where it's going, that there's a screen, because the screen really helps with like labeling the projects. It helps knowing where the arrangement, like where you are in the arrangement. It's infinitely useful. This device, though, is lacking in. There's a lot of things wrong, and that's part of this world, is like you're going to get some things good and then some things not so good. With this one, let's start. So bars and beats, yes, that's totally here. That's great. No tap tempo though, but come on. I use a little metronome, chord metronome to do tap tempo to know what my tempo is. Inputs, so much better than the Tascam, except only 2 these inputs have 1/4 inch, and they are really stiff. Like this thing goes in, it is stuck in there. It is unbelievably stiff. And then phantom power is on 4 of these XLR input. So this is very good for microphones, a bit of bands, and then you can get an adapters if you want to make use of the XLRs. Like if you have your output of your iPad, and which was typically a 1/4-inch output, you could maybe find a way to do 1/8-inch line out to XLR to make use of some of these inputs. But it's very bizarre why there aren't more combo jacks like the L8 and L12. You see how quickly I'm naming all the different devices, and that's why you have to know these to want to follow along here. The recording rate is locked to 16-bit and 41. It maybe does 24-bit and 41, but it doesn't go to 48, and it doesn't do 4896. But either way, you're still probably going to get some pretty good recording from 16-bit, especially if it's not the entire track being made on here. This does not do stereo mix alongside the individual tracks. So for my podcast, it was a bit frustrating because I usually do them under the wire, and so I actually accidentally hit render on a 30-minute track, and this thing took forever to render it, and then I wouldn't do that again on such a long track, but it didn't. So this is weird to get a quick stereo out of, because I was performing and therefore I did some stuff with the faders, yet it doesn't record that, and I don't think it does automation recording. So if I were to do it over again, I would maybe make sure to make use of the line outs to record the mix, the stereo mix, and then later on you can get the stems very quickly over the SD card, or I guess USB. You can get those stems. There is something with a USB drive input. I don't know if there's a way to maybe record the stereo mix onto that. That could be something, but that's an area where now you dip into L8 and L12 because they do that. L8 is meant for podcasts, so it does do. Well, let me just finish R20, and then we can put this R20 away. Workflow on R20 seems to be pretty good so far, but one thing that is awful is the loops that are on there. They take forever to audition and to import. That was very bizarre. It took like 10 seconds or more per loop to see what they sound like, but that's cool that the option is there to just import files from a touchscreen interface that you can see what's going on. Recording workflow is pretty good. One thing I was worried about is if this thing is locked to a grid and and you're doing music that is not on a tempo grid, I was worried that you'd be stuck looking at bar numbers that are not lining up with your song, which is funny because I like the bar numbers, but then there's having that option, but I also want the option to turn it off. And no video I saw yet addresses this, but you can flip this into mixer mode and just look at the faders, and that will help you not have to look at the bars in the sequencer mode. And that's something that I would maybe take over to the DAW world with Ableton, is if you are working that way, you can always flip Ableton. I think you can move the mixer, just move to mixer mode, and because Ableton always has a bar grid. It's pretty frustrating, whereas other DAWs have you can flip into time mode. So that removes those bars, like Reaper, and I think Logic probably does that. So workflow is pretty good. Operation noise, sound quality sounds pretty good so far, and it has the send effects which go into modeling. I don't know if I'd want to get carried away with that, and then there's Guitar Lab, which you connect to your phone, and you can design amp stuff. So there's a lot of effects options. So if you take this to a bedroom to record, you can insert different you want a wah-wah and an amp for your bass, you can do that without having to hook in a pedal. So that stuff is pretty good. There is no, from what I understand, there's no MIDI sync on this to anything. I don't think there's a clock I don't think even if you plugged it in with your computer as an interface, I don't think you get sync. So anyways, it's very good. I don't know if I would go ahead and buy it after the rental, because the L8 and the L12, it's hard to say. Yeah, L8 and L12 kind of are really competing with me for which one I would own. So yeah, and as I said before, for like a performance, I would have to take the line outs and I would put it into my other Zoom H4n portable recorder to get that stereo. So that was interesting. That I guess takes us over to L8, L12. L8 and L12, from what I understand, don't do bars and beats modes, but they do this performance stuff well, because they separate your tracks and give you stereo. L8 though, you're getting a lot of podcast features that might be kind of paying for those, like phone, TRRS phone input for interviews, and noise mixing a center channel, I think, to remove something with feedback. And L8 can actually work with the iPhone, and so can the R20, I believe. But when the L8 works with the iPhone, it needs that iPhone takes up the USB power, and then it has to run on batteries. So that means there'd be no phantom power. That's just getting into a really niche thing, but that's what happens. Is they could only, in every device, they can only do so much. And other devices like the DP series are there. Oh, something's gone on. Oh. I said the name of the voice assistant for Apple when I said the DP blank, and that thing came up. I'm not going to say it so it doesn't interrupt my video again, but the voice assistant for Apple. The DPs are from like 2010, and then the Dp-24SD is a bit more modern, but they're not designed for like Apple and Android type connections, whereas the new Zoom products are, and that's pretty cool. A Tascam Model 12, I believe, would probably have some, if it's a class compliant sound card, then it would work with your iOS system. But that iOS stuff gets, it's if that becomes your priority, then yeah, you're layering on more things to work through. L8 and L12, I'll just go through those quickly. Yeah, stereo mix alongside the individual tracks. L8, L12 save the scene of what's happening, whereas the DP series, or Dp-08, no, the voice assistant came on. The DP systems, they don't, the Dp-08 doesn't, like if you had reverbs on different channels and panning, that doesn't get saved into the session. Every time you load it, it's back to square one. And that's kind of what's fun about the DPs, is that you got to work on your track, finish it, do something with it, get it off, and don't let them sit on these devices. So that's pretty good about those. But the L8 and L12 do save like reverb sends and all that in the session. And I would imagine L8 and L12 have pretty good operation noise. They should be pretty solid. And so we're almost done here. Oh, no bars and beats on the L8 and L12 from what I've seen. But it does have a metronome, even on the L8, which was meant for podcasters. It still has a metronome. I don't know how easy it is to modify, if that's bothersome or not. Model 12 has no bars and beats. I might have said that earlier. From what I've seen on the videos, I've not seen it flip into bars and beats mode. Dp-24SD Tascam has bars and beats, but Dp-24SD and Model 12 are bigger machines, so they don't really fit. For me, they're kind of getting away from everything because they become centerpiece machinery. And even though Dp-24SD looks pretty good, and I'd love to really try it out, I'm reluctant to try it because there's a learning curve that I'd have to invest time in learning it. And yeah, as I said, it's pretty big. Model 12 has MIDI sync. Dp-24, an older one, had MIDI sync. They got rid of it. I don't know if that is on the version that has the CD burner on it. Yeah, no more MIDI sync on the Dp-24. All right, so we're almost done here, and I'll just give you 3 more devices to look at that you've probably looked at already. A Bluebox by 1010 Music or something they're called. That most people are familiar with the black box, which is like a loop machine. The Bluebox is actually a recording mixer machine, so that was interesting to me, but I believe that the inputs on it are 1/8" TRS ins. If they're not 1/8", then they're at max 1/4", and therefore to do stuff with microphones, you need to have a mixer alongside it, and but it does do MIDI sync, I believe. So Bluebox is good for more people doing stuff with modulars and beats, and probably very good in and out with the computer. Yeah. And Portacapture X8 by Tascam. I just found that one. I saw it once on like a news announcement, and I saw it again doing this research. That's a handheld that has 2 combo jack inputs, and it's got a big screen on it for almost like the size of an iPhone. And the Portacapture has a few modes. One is like nature record, like they've made it very targeted to ones. They even has an ASMR mode. So that's the Portacapture, but there's a music multi-track mode. I did not see bars and beats on it, and I don't know how useful that mode is, but that could be a very good option if you want a high quality machine. But it'd be similar to like a Zoom H6 or H8. H4n actually has multi-track, but I have a H4n, but the multi-track mode is not very easy to use. I try not to go anywhere near that mode. H4n is very useful for the 2 other modes, which is stereo and there's this combo mode where it has the microphone and the line ins. That's a useful mode for film video stuff. H4n also does not take in guitar signals. Maybe the Portacapture X8 does. And finally, a Mackie Onyx8. So this one was a mixer. This is just a mixer, and it has an SD card recorder and 24-bit or more, 2496 recording, excuse me. It just takes the stereo mix. So, but the thing with the Mackie is it could have good effects, so that you could get a cool thing going where you could make some recordings on that. But it doesn't count as a multi-track recorder. I just threw it in as an extra option because it like you could do a podcast jam mix like what I've done and record it onto that SD card, but you'd have all the tracks baked in. Okay. So this is it. I hope this is a lot of stuff coming at you. I hope this is very niche for people who've gone through different lists. I went through manuals to find out these answers, and I guess I could redo this video with showing you the breakdowns of each. But for me, the takeaway is I'd probably keep. Hard to say if I'd keep the Dp-08 and something between the Zoom R20 and the L8 or L12. And by the way, L12 has a mode in there that does delay compensation for the input monitoring delay. So that's something interesting about L12. L12 also has, I think, foot switch for punch-in and a foot switch in general. The problem is now L12 is probably a lot bigger, and it's also bumps up a few $100s in price, but it is more music oriented than the L8 is. All right, that's it. So yeah, let me know what you thought, and if you also went through the same predicament trying to pick which is the right device for you. All right, take care now.